Hello, everyone, and I hope you're well. My name is Tanner Dagenais, and I'm the host of Self-Sabotage Solutions. On this podcast, it's my opportunity and my pleasure to be able to share self-sabotage information, why we self-sabotage, what is self-sabotage, and solutions to self-sabotage. So how you can actually address your self-sabotaging behaviors, how you're able to move forward in life, how you're able to get past those habits that are so hard to break, how you're able to get past that wall, and how you're able to understand that there's not something wrong with you, that there is a reason why you're having these problems in the first place. And so with that, there's a lot of understanding how we're influenced. And so that brings me to what I'm talking about today, which is how propaganda is manipulating you to self-sabotage. So this will be a lot, like, very informative, and there will be some statistics in it, but it's gonna be very eye-opening, I think for a lot of people. So first, let's talk about imitative learning, because that's really what a lot of how propaganda works and how a lot of manipulation is works. You can kind of think of imitative learning as like peer pressure. Like, how come, why does peer pressure work so well? Well, it's because we are imitating what we see, what we the people around us. We are influenced by our surroundings, by our environment, the people in our lives, right? So we learn from our surroundings. We often mimic those actions or those ideas, and we play out those same things in our life. So this doesn't even just apply to the people in our lives. This applies to the television, the cell phones, the social media. It all has a major influence on us. And I think a lot of people like to downplay that influence, or, they might know about it, but they just don't give it the time of day to really consider what it means to them. And so I think it's important to understand this information, because this is actually a big part of where a lot of our self-sabotaging behavior comes from. Now, why are we imitative learners? What is this, why were we designed like this? I think that's important to talk about as well. So we are imitative learners because it allows us to fit in with society. It allows us to be safe. And that's really what a part of our mind, which is the subconscious mind. I'm sure you've probably heard me talk about it, but if not, this part of our mind is more like the primal part of our mind. It doesn't really know good from bad or anything like that. It just understands that whatever is familiar, whatever is around us, the more times we see something, the more safe that thing is. And its primary goal is to keep us safe, to keep us alive, to keep us fitting in with society, essentially, because it's learned over thousands of years that fitting in is the safest option. So, way back in the day when we were hunters and gatherers, if you weren't part of a tribe, if you weren't part of the group, and you had to fend for yourself, you had to make your own, shelter, you had to make your own fire, you had to catch your own food. It was much harder to survive back then, right? But even further down the line, like, let's say the Salem witch trials, right? Those women were persecuted and were attacked just because they were different. And we've seen it all throughout history, right? The Holocaust. There's so many different examples of us being attacked because we're different, and we're different from other people. And that's part of what our mind does. Our mind, knows this and tries to protect us, so it helps us fit in. And even now in today's age, when it doesn't quite matter as much, the mind is still trying to protect us, still trying to help us fit in. And this part of the mind is very, very important. It's, when we were kids, this part of our mind helped us learn how to fit in with society, how to be able to talk like everyone around us, how to be able to do these sorts of things. This part of our mind is super, super hyperactive at that part of our age. When we are kids, that's why kids can actually learn so quickly. That's why kids can, or they're like sponges, essentially, because this part of the mind, the subconscious, is constantly scanning surroundings, constantly bringing in pieces of information at least 11 million pieces of information a second, compared to our conscious mind, which is only about 40 pieces of information a second. So you can tell it's a huge difference. Or this part of our mind, and what it's doing with all this information, all this data it's collecting, is really just putting it down onto a hard drive, onto a giant hard drive, which is our brain. And it kind of works like a record player or like programs on a computer. So it will actually play back the things that we've seen. It will play back the things that we've learned from society, from other people around us. So this is why, we might start taking actions that we don't really understand what. Like our conscious mind, we may consciously be saying we want to eat healthy, but our subconscious mind is playing the unhealthy eating program or the unhealthy eating data that we had played, and we had learned from like maybe our parents or from all the TV shows that we watch or all of our friends or whatever it may be, right? We have learned those actions. We have learned how to act like that. And part of overcoming self-sabotage is to learn how you're influenced so you can address it, and then rewiring that part of your brain, changing the data and convincing your subconscious mind so that whatever you want in life is the most familiar, is the most safe option for you to be taking. So we learn imitatively. We learn from the things around us. We learn and we mimic those things. It's been proven. That have you ever had like a friend who was always singing a song or always saying something, and you found yourself to start to say those things, even if you might not have wanted to? That's the imitative learning. That is the power of it. And there's billions of dollars spent on advertisements every year for this exact reason, because the companies know that you will mimic what you see. And the more times you see something, the more repetition that is played, the more you will be drawn to it. The more times something is promoted. So like if someone does something like eats some kind of food and they're promoted, everyone's like, yeah, good job, you're more likely to want to be able to do that because you want to get that recognition. You want to get that promotion, right? But it works the opposite way too. Let's say you do something and everyone says, oh, what the heck, that's bad, that's not a good thing. You're more likely to get away from that thing. So that can be hard as well. But it also works with the negative. So if you did something negative and it gets reinforced, or someone else did something negative and you saw them get reinforced, like let's say a kid kicks a dog, right? And he's having so much fun and all the kids are like, yeah, woohoo, woo. And you see that as a kid, you're more likely to think that's cool, to think that's a good thing to do because they got a bunch of negative reinforcement. That's really the way the mind works. That's the way our subconscious mind works. Now, consciously, we can actually think differently from that, but our subconscious actually is often driving our actions, driving our thoughts. And it's been shown that about 90 to 95% of our daily thoughts and actions actually come from our subconscious mind, actually come from the things we learn from others. So it's a little scary almost, but it's actually, the cool thing is that you can actually change what you expose yourself. You can change what is familiar to you so that those things are actually what you're drawn to instead of, the negative things. So, propaganda is exactly that. It is the more oftentimes, or the more times you see something, the more times that, the more times that you see something, the more times it's repeated in front of you, the more likely you're going to be understanding it or believing it. So there was actually Joseph Goebbels, I think is how you say his name. He was the Nazi propaganda minister, and he has a quote where he says, propaganda must therefore always be essential and repeated essentially. It must confine itself to a few points and repeat them over and over. So he knew that this is how part of our mind works, that the more times that we hear something, the more times that it's said from different sources, the more times it's backed up again and again by an authority figure, the more likely we're to believe it, the more likely that's going to be accepted by the greater majority. You know who else said this? Something similar? George Bush. George Bush said, see, in my line of work, you got to keep repeating things over and over and over to kind of catapult the propaganda. And because he knew also that that is how things work. That's how part of your mind works. And oftentimes the people who are in charge, presidents, people of top corporations, they know a lot of this information. And it's unfortunate that a lot of us are not taught this information, because then we can use it to our advantage. And I think that's the main reason why we're not taught it in school, why we're not taught it in, any parts of our life, really. You have to go searching outside of the school system to be able to learn about how you're influenced on this level, and to be really be able to understand it from the point of, wow, these people are influencing my actions. And I think maybe it gets touched on slightly in some schools, but does not to this point, not to the point of really understanding it and to be able to use it to create the life you want, to be able to overcome self-sabotage. Okay, so another couple examples of imitative learning. There was this study done where they had a bunch of people in a room, right? And they had one person starting to pull their nose a lot. He was just, he was just pulling his nose a lot. And what they noticed is that people in the room started doing the same thing, and it started to catch on. And a lot of people started pulling on their nose. Unconsciously, their subconscious mind was picking up on that. Hey, this person's pulling their nose a lot. Maybe we should start doing that too. And they did that. And that there's been many different examples of this, that we mimic the things that we see. Another interesting one is for knitting. There was two groups of women knitting, or there's two different groups of women. One group of women who were knitting, and another group of women who were watching those women knit. And what they did is they scanned their brain function to understand how their brains lit up while they were knitting. What they found out is that the group of women who were knitting, their brain lit up in this very special way, right? But the women who were just watching the other woman knit, they weren't even knitting themselves. Their brain was lighting up in the exact same way, as if they were knitting themselves. And that's exactly what's happening when you're watching TV. Your brain is lighting up in the same exact way as if you were doing that thing. So that brings me to my next couple points. Is I'm going to go over some different TV shows and how they've affected the greater society, the greater good. So we got the Bridgerton effect, which is a pretty recent one. I'm not sure if you've heard about, or the effect is called the Bridgerton effect, but the show is called the Bridgertons or something. And it has to do with like very pompous people. I actually haven't watched the show myself, but when I looked into this, I was very interested by it. So people are actually mimicking the fashion of the TV show. And so these people are, what we've seen is that, in TikTok, there's been an increase of pearl chokers being worn. Retail reporters are seeing a surge in sales of corsets, silk dresses, statement earrings. There's been an increased online search for tiaras. John Lewis has seen sales of croquet sets rise by 90%. So a lot of these things I'm going to be talking about can't necessarily be a direct causation, but I think they're very, very indicative of how much of an influence they have on our society. And obviously these aren't the only things that might have the influence, but I think they are a very big factor when we're talking about these things, because they directly relate and directly correlate with them. So people are essentially mimicking the fashion of the TV show that they were watching, because their mind was like, oh, I want to fit in. I want to wear this thing, because to their mind, that's what they saw. It saw this was part of society. This is what it is, what it takes to fit in with society. The next one is The Queen's Gambit. I'm not sure if you've heard about this one. It's a chess TV show. It was on Netflix. Some people call this the Netflix effect. But really, after the show aired, inquiries for chess sets went up about 250% on eBay. Google search inquiries for how to play chess hit an all-time high for 9 years. The original novel, The Queen's Gambit, it became a bestseller 37 years after its release, after this TV show came out. The number of new players on chess.com increased by 5 times. So that must have had a direct effect, right? Like, there's no way that this didn't affect those increases when the show came out, because it was one of the most watched TV shows on Netflix at the time, and so many people watch Netflix. Another example is Gone in 60 Seconds. Now, this is a more localized example. I wish there was a bigger study done on this, but it wasn't. There wasn't enough data from what I could tell to find more. But Gone in 60 Seconds with Nicolas Cage and Angelina Jolie. So Nicolas Cage in the in the movie steals cars, right? And he works on a team with Angelina Jolie. And not only does he get all these really cool cars, right? Like fast cars and like super expensive cars that they steal, but he also gets Angelina Jolie. And what's interesting about this movie is on the weekend after the movie played, actual car theft increased in Burnaby, Canada by 60%. Now, like, there could have been other factors at play, of course, but it is a direct causation and must have definitely influenced those people to want to be able to steal more cars and give them that inspiration to do it, because their subconscious minds were saying, wow, not only did this person get all these cars and get away with it, they got the girl, they got the hot woman, they got Angelina Jolie, right? And that's the way our minds work. We want to fit in, especially when there's positive reinforcement like there was in this movie. Another interesting one, the Huxtable effect. And I know there's a lot of controversy around Bill Cosby, and I don't think he's a good guy, obviously, but his show had some positive influences. So it was one of the most, I guess, best portrayal of an African American family for its time. Like, there was not a better TV show before that time that showed an African American family in such a good light. So Bill Cosby in the show, Mr. Huxtable, he was a doctor. His wife was a lawyer. All the kids, went to college. They were all very smart. And what they found was SAT scores for black males increased. In 1990, over 75% of black males graduated from high school. And Morehouse College, which is actually part of the TV show, those enrollments increased by 37% for black males. And then controversially, the same kind of thing, but on the opposite effect, we saw it with the Lil Wayne effect, or what people call the Lil Wayne effect, or some psychologists call the Lil Wayne effect. And it's hard to say that, it was all Lil Wayne, because there's many different hip hop artists that kind of promoted the same kind of thing, the drugs, the getting money and not doing much with their life, just partying and gambling and doing all that stuff. But SAT scores for black males had decreased during that time. In 2010, only 47% of black males graduated from high school. Black male incarceration rates increased by 50% since 1990. So obviously you can't call for direct causation from these things, like I've said before, but there is direct influence. We mimic, especially knowing how this part of your mind works, knowing how imitative learning works, that we will mimic the things that we see, the things that are most prominent, the things that are very popular for the time. And you can't deny that, the Cosby Show wasn't very popular, that the Lil Wayne effect wasn't very popular, or Lil Wayne wasn't very popular, or the other, Dr. Dre, or any of those other mainstream rap artists that have been portrayed and using that, the scene of drugs and sex and partying and all that, right? So this is how we've been influenced. And I think it's interesting because a lot of people think propaganda can only be done in one way, but propaganda is all around us and it's used in many different ways. And many of us don't realize that, sometimes propaganda can be used for good. Sometimes propaganda can be used for bad. But really what propaganda is using the subconscious mind, or essentially what propaganda is someone knowing how we're influenced and using that to manipulate us towards a certain action, towards a certain thing. And that is exactly why they have coffee and alcohol making an appearance in like almost every movie or TV show, right? How many, like, if you look at like any TV show or movie you watch nowadays, you'd be hard pressed to find not a TV show or movie without alcohol in it. And I really want you to consider this next time you're watching a TV show. Keep an eye out for it. How many times do you see it? This is what is so important. The more times you see that coffee or that alcohol, the more times you'll be drawn towards it. And there's a big reason why there's so many people who believe that, they need alcohol to relax or to have a good time or to fit in, because that's what all the commercials show. That's what all the movies show. That is what we've been taught as a society. That's what all of our friends do. That is what our parents have done. Is that they, we always saw your dad come home and have a beer after work to relax, or your parents had some drinks while they were relaxing, right? Because this part of your mind is going to be saying that, oh, this is how we relax. This is how we have fun. We got a drink to do it, right? For coffee, very common beliefs around that is that we need coffee to wake up in the morning, right? You're not yourself without my coffee. Oh, I haven't had my morning coffee. I'm not myself. Or, I need this to function. And that is because of a lot of the programming behind coffee and TV shows and things like that. And just from work in general, like when I go to work and I tell people I don't drink coffee, like, oh, that might change. You're going to need it. It's like, no, I'm not. Like, I don't need that coffee. And people literally believe that without coffee, they can't function. That is crazy to me, because once you understand how coffee actually affects you, then you will realize that coffee is actually holding you back. And we've been essentially programmed through this imitative learning. We've been manipulated through the propaganda on coffee and alcohol and various other things to be drawn towards it, to want it, to believe that we need it in our lives to be able to function or to relax or to have a good time. So the next point I want to talk about is the hypersexualized content that we've been exposed to lately. So just some small statistics. In 1998, about 56% of all shows had sexual content. In 2005, about 70% of all TV shows had sexual content. Now in 2018, 80% of all shows had sexual content. I tried finding one for current day, but I didn't quite see it. I'm sure it's pretty close to like 90 or something like that. But really, even if it doesn't even increase past 80%, that's still a significant number. And the more times we see that, the more times we're drawn to be sexualized. The more times we're drawn to want to go jerk off or masturbate and watch porn or something similar, right? And so there was actually a study done that showed teens between the ages of 12 and 17 were twice as likely to initiate in intercourse within the next year when seeing sex on television. And this makes total sense, right? Because when you see it, on television, or you see other people do it, you want to do it as well. And I think television is actually one of the biggest manipulation and propaganda machines of all time, because there's proven facts and proven studies done showing that when we're watching television, our minds are essentially going into like an alpha brainwave state or a theta state, and they are essentially going to a state of hypnosis, because we are relaxed and we are just letting our minds go and our conscious minds kind of just wander off, and we are just not even paying attention sometimes. And that's why there's so many subliminal messages within television shows and movies that are influencing us towards what we want. That's why there's product placements. Have you noticed in TV shows and movies and things, like there'll be little product placements of like Coca-Cola or like Jif peanut butter, or whatever kind of product placements you want to talk about, some kind of beer or some kind of cigarette carton or something like that, right? Starbucks coffee cup. There's many reasons why companies will pay thousands of dollars to be able to put their logo or their product into a TV show or a movie, because it's been shown and proven that people will want that thing more. The more times they see it, the more it's repeated. Remember what the Nazi propaganda minister was talking about. the more times something is repeated, the more of an effect it has on people. And you know, it's been proven. It's not a matter of debate at this point. If you think you can't be manipulated, then I'm sorry. It's an absolute fact that you're being manipulated, especially if you're not paying attention to these things. And I think that some people might get manipulated better or easier than others. And I think a big part of that, it has to do with your mindset and knowing how this works. And I think the more you know how this stuff works, actually, the more you'll be drawn to turn off some of that garbage content, or that content that is literally manipulating you into being your worst self. Because I think that is what we're seeing with a lot of television shows and movies nowadays. If you look at like the TV shows and movies back in the day compared to now, they've gotten so much more dark and sexualized and just negative in a crazy way. And they're constantly putting in the next agenda, the next thing, to convince people that, you know, this is the best thing to be doing. This is what you want to be doing, right? And I think that's very important to talk about. And I think the more you know, the more you know about all this stuff, the more you're able to do something about it. And once you have learned about it, if you just ignore the fact, that's a huge fact of self-sabotage. You know, being ignorant to the fact is one thing, which is still self-sabotage, because you didn't take the time to learn and to understand how you're influenced. But, you know, it's not all your fault for that reason, because we're not taught about it. And I think it's intentional, like I said before. You know, the government and maybe the giant corporations, you know, big pharma, all those things I think are colluding in some kind of way. And it sounds like a conspiracy theory, but when you look at it like an overall picture, you know, we're getting attacked from a health standpoint. We're getting attacked from a manipulation standpoint, propaganda standpoint. We're getting attacked on a spiritual level. We're getting attacked on so many different levels, and we're getting beat down essentially on so many different levels that it's really, really having a major impact on our society. I mean, think about it. Our society is the most addicted, the most depressed, the most obese, the most unhealthy it's ever been in a long time, despite us having the most technology we've ever had, despite us, you know, being the most advanced we've ever had, despite us knowing what we've done in the past, we're still being affected by these things. We're still being programmed and manipulated by this propaganda, by these things, even though we've seen it before in such nasty ways with the Holocaust or, you know, other propaganda techniques. You know, this is why I wanted to talk about this today, because the more you know about how you're influenced, the more you're able to do something about it. Like when I'm watching a lot of TV shows now, I try to actually barely watch any TV now anymore, because the more TV shows I watch, the more I realize this is not what I want to be imitating. This is not what I want in my life. And I oftentimes just turn it off because it doesn't sit well with me. And I think that's important for people to understand. So really, next time you're watching TV, think about what kind of actions might I be imitating in this? You know, have I been acting a certain way because of this TV show? Have I been doing this certain thing because of this TV show? And, you know, that brings me to the point of thinking about, you know, all the gun violence. And I don't think it's all because of video games or all because of TV shows. I think it's a mix of everything. It's a mix of, you know, of like a sick society being polluted with toxic food. It's a mix of society being attacked by harmful pharmaceutical products that are just terrible. A mix of all these very dark TV shows that are normalizing like death and like abuse and all this dark stuff, and songs and all this stuff on top of it is just a combining effect. And I think that it's creating very mentally sick people, very mentally broken people. And that if you understand that government's main goal is usually to gain power over its people, because it's been proven over thousands of years that when you have a government, they're always going to be taking for more power, reaching for more power. And I don't say this to say that all people in government are bad or all people in government have ill intent, because I know there are some people there who want to be able to help people. But the majority of the way the system is built in a way to disempower its people, to keep the people docile so that they don't rise up and they don't take back their power that was taken from them. And that's what I think we need to understand. We need to understand that we're being manipulated, we're being broken down, we're propaganda is being used against us in a way to keep us broken, to keep us self-sabotaging, because they know that a weak population is easier to control. A weak population won't question the science or won't question the next big thing that's happening to them. And it's kind of scary. And I know I was kind of in shock when I learned a lot of this information, because I was like, there's no way. There's no way that all these people are just going about every single part of their day and they don't even understand this. They don't understand how they're being influenced, and that, they're being led down towards their worst life. They're being led down towards obesity and depression and addiction. And that's why I want to talk about this information. That's why I think it's so important. When I was trying to make these changes to become healthier or to quit, drinking alcohol or stop smoking marijuana or whatever, I encountered major resistance. I kept hitting that wall and kept telling myself I want to do it, but my subconscious mind, that record player, that hard drive of the information I've learned and the data I've learned from all the things I've seen, kept getting played and kept reinforcing and taking over. And I, instead of stopping drinking alcohol or eating healthier, I would be drinking alcohol. I'd cave in. I'd just go get that Chick-fil-A. I'd go eat that McDonald's. And what I found is that when I started to understand why I was getting influenced and how I can make that a difference there, I was able to start making the changes much easier, because I knew I could cut out those things that were negatively influencing me. I can start adding in positive influences. I can start convincing and changing the narrative of my subconscious mind, showing positive reinforcement towards the things I want in life and negative reinforcement towards the things I don't want in life. And that is how you can do it too. You can do this on your own, and there is a possibility you can get to exactly where you want in life, but it could take you some time. I know if I wouldn't have had someone to, help me in my process, in my journey, a coach to show me the way that they've gone, then I might not have been here where I am in my life right now, sharing this information with you. I never thought I'd be sharing information over a podcast. If you would have asked me 5 years ago, I'd be like, hell no, there's no way. If you would have asked me 5 years ago if I would have been stopped drinking alcohol, I don't think I would have been able to do that. And tell you the truthfully, I would be not drinking alcohol. But now I'm almost 4.5 years sober, and I don't drink alcohol anymore. I don't have any draw to it. And there's a reason why, because I've cut out that propaganda. I've cut out that propaganda, and I've created new beliefs behind it. And I've convinced my subconscious mind, I guess I should say, and reprogrammed myself to want the opposite, to not want that alcohol. I've created that negative reinforcement to show that it's bad and I shouldn't be doing that. And that's exactly what you can do. So get out there and start doing these things. Start keeping an eye on the TV shows you're watching. Start understanding and maybe considering how you might be getting influenced to take the actions that you're taking. Because I promise you, there's going to be some correlations that once you start paying attention to it and analyzing it, you start to realize that, hey, maybe this is not what I want to be watching. Maybe this is the reason why I'm having such a hard time quitting alcohol, or why I'm having such a hard time, not eating that unhealthy food, because I keep seeing advertisements for it everywhere. I keep watching my friends eat this food. I keep hanging out with people who are drinking alcohol all the time and inviting me to drink the alcohol, right? And that is exactly what they want. That's exactly how you're influenced. But if you want to be able to do these things, and you are struggling, and you know the information just like I did, and you want to be able to move forward, well, you can reach out to me. I'd be love to help you with this information, to be able to help you reprogram your mind and help you understand how you're influenced and help you understand the subconscious mind so that you can better take control of your life and you can take back the control and the reins from the government, from the advertisement agencies, from big pharma, from all these, giant corporations. And instead of them manipulating you and programming you and using their propaganda to create your worst life and you mimicking it, what you can do instead is take back the control and you can mimic something good. You can start programming and using propaganda to create something better in your life. That's exactly what I want you to do. That's exactly what I teach other people to do, is be able to understand and to be able to do these things and how to overcome self-sabotage. Well, I hope you guys all enjoyed this podcast. If you liked this, please give it a like. Please subscribe. It helps get the message out there, helps get it out to other people. If you, want to share with other people, please do. Please share it with as many people as possible. Please leave a comment in the section below or, contact me if you have questions about it. I would love to speak with you about the subconscious mind and what you can do in your life. So reach out to me. Check out the links below to any of my Facebook, my YouTube. If you want to watch this and you're listening to this on the podcast, you can go to my YouTube and my Rumble. If you're on YouTube or Rumble and you want to listen to this on the go, then go down to my podcast, right? And I release my own videos every Thursday, and every Sunday I have other people on the show to share their self-sabotage stories so that you can understand and hear, where people are coming from and how. I want everyone to know that no matter where you are, where you live, what you've experienced in life, who you are, if you're a boy or girl, how old you are, we're all able to overcome self-sabotage. And that is what I want for the world, is for the world to be able to overcome self-sabotage, for the world to know this information, for the world to take back their power, and the world to power up. And that's why my company is called Power Up Self-Sabotage Solutions. Once again, my name is Tanner Dajne. I hope you all have enjoyed this information and have a great day. Thank you.